All right. Good morning, right? We're still in morning. Welcome again for those that have been here to RVNA Health. I recognize most people in the room who've been here before, so we appreciate you coming back to our series here, our dementia series. So this is the fourth in a series of 7 lectures. So we're really excited to be able to have Leslie Ogilvie here. Did I say that correctly?
You did.
Okay.
Yeah. Thank
Who
you.
is a certified hearing specialist. And Danielle is our OT, who's a certified dementia specialist, and I'm a physical therapist. I'm Gigi, who oversees the rehab. So we're really excited to have you. And I'll have Leslie kind of do her own introduction, and we'll go from there. And we're excited to have her.
Okay, fantastic. So my name is Leslie Ogilvie. Thank you for the introduction. And I have a mobile audiology practice. So I spend my Monday through Friday driving around Fairfield County, and I primarily work with seniors in assisted living communities. I like to call them super seniors because most of my folks are 80, 90, over 100. If you haven't met and spent time with people over 100, put it on your bucket list. I find them fascinating. I learn something every day, but particularly from people that have lived a good long life. I'm going to take a little break and just say for people here and also for people on Zoom, because I'm talking about hearing, but because I'm making a presentation, let me know if you can't hear me. Obviously, it's important, and there are things I'm going to talk about along the way, some strategies for hearing better, having better communication. So if there are people that for whatever reason online can't hear, obviously they have volume on their computer. For people here, you can't turn your ears up, so you could get closer, but you could also just raise your hand, give me a thumbs up if I need to talk louder, because I think this is important, and I hope you'll maybe bring something away from this morning's talk. So I wasn't always an ear nerd. I have a bachelor in psychology, and I had a concentration in business. So for the first 16 years of my professional career, I worked in human resources, and I helped people in business avoid, employee fights. I did a lot of employee retention things and facilitating, so working with people. Transitioned into hearing health almost 30 years ago. So my second career has actually been my longest. And I started working in a brick and mortar business, kind of the traditional, come in, get your hearing tested, fitting hearing aids, working with, all things related to these little complicated, mysterious devices. And I always was the one in the office. We had a small office with one exam room. I was always the one that was doing out of office service. And at that point, this was in the late 90s, very early 2000s, there weren't a lot of assisted living communities. There were nursing homes and people aging at home. So I did a lot of work in nursing homes. And I remember one series of days, I had a client who had a significant amount of dementia. She had reverted to speaking Polish. Polish was her first language. She had learned English along the way, as her family recounted to me, but she was speaking Polish 100%. I mean, occasionally a word here or there. So testing her was difficult. I had her daughter sitting next to me, giving her directions in Polish and trying to figure out the proper responses that she was giving us. Got the hearing aids, went to fit her. I'll probably still cry if I do, I apologize, but fit her with the hearing aids, put them in her ears, and I said, "How are you today? Can you hear me?" And she looked at me with this big smile on her face and she said, "I would like to dance with you." Mm-hmm. And we were bawling, right? And we were just thinking, how could this happen? That just like that, her brain just kind of connected in a different way. So that's why I do what I do, and with the people that I work with. So you don't have to tell me, or you don't have to ask me where there's a connection between the brain and hearing. I've seen it for a long time. I did a little bit of Google searching. Anybody can do that these days. And you can find lots of different reports and studies on, well, actually not that many, but there are some really good ones. NIH has one, Johns Hopkins, there's a Dr. Lin out of Johns Hopkins who's been doing great work since about 2010, showing that there is a connection between hearing loss and cognitive decline. And I don't need to go through the details. For people that are living with this, whether you're a caregiver or you're a family member, you can see so many different things that can contribute to keeping someone healthy. And so to kind of wrap up all of the studies and the things that I've read, untreated hearing loss leads to dementia worsening faster, as do a lot of other things, right? For most of us, we know that you want to eat well, talking about the Parkinson's seminars that you were having. I'm sure some of the other talks that you've had, how do we keep people healthy? And there are lots of different things. It's movement, it's nutrition, it's being connected to others. And that's where hearing, to me, underlays so many of those things. When you're having a conversation, when you're giving people directions and they can't understand, they can withdraw, right? And it makes it harder. Another way that I like to, my little analogy is when you wake up in the morning and you've had whatever amount of sleep you've had that night, you have a certain amount of energy. And that energy needs to be used throughout the day for all the different things you're going to be doing. And if you are, if you're moving around, if you're making choices in your life, that all takes energy. When you don't hear, it takes energy away from other things. So if you can improve your hearing, it gives you energy to do other things. That's kind of my simple way of looking at it. So I did actually come up with a few general informational slides that I thought were important. And here are just some facts for you to think about as we're talking about this. 1 in 5 people have hearing loss. 80% do nothing about it. We can talk about why, but that's just a fact. Another fact is that 1 in 5 people have hearing loss. Oops, you know what? I'm reading the wrong screen. I apologize. Let's go back. Okay. So by the time Americans reach their 70s, 2/3 have hearing loss. And there are some people that have hearing loss earlier in life, but the majority of people, age-related hearing loss is a thing. So it's always a good idea to get screened if you haven't been screened already, to find out where your hearing is and keep track of it. So, and then getting back to, so 1 in 5 people have hearing loss and 80% do nothing about it. And that's another reality I deal with all the time. So as much as I work with hearing aids, I test people, I fit people with hearing aids, I get the hearing aids to continue to work well, take a lot of wax out of people's ears, that's super fun. But the reality is that's a piece of it, right? And the majority of people aren't doing anything about it. So that will lead to the rest of my talk. Hearing impairment is more common in men than women, and there might be a number of different factors. Men have traditionally had noisier jobs. Men were traditionally in the armed service. Men like to ride motorcycles, and we all go to loud concerts. But for people that work with older folks, most of the people I deal with are women. But it's still good to, to check into it regardless of the gender. And this is sort of that summary of some of the studies that have come up over the last really 20 plus years. Seniors with untreated hearing loss are significantly more likely to develop dementia over time than those who retain their hearing, or I would say who choose to improve their hearing. And this was the study by Johns Hopkins and also the National Institute on Aging. So just a good baseline. Okay, so sure.
I'm just maybe getting ahead of things here, but are we talking only about hearing aids, or are there other types of exercises for the ear or whatever?
We're going to get to that.
Yeah.
Yep, exactly. So because most people don't do anything about it, right? We just talked about that. What else can you do, right? How do you, because it's really about brain health, because the ear doesn't hear, the brain hears. So the ear is passing information to the brain. And if it's not perfect, if you're missing something, the brain's trying to fill in the gaps. I tell people it's like a puzzle. You might have a 500-piece puzzle, and if you've got a mild hearing loss, you're missing a few of those pieces. Your brain can kind of figure it out, depending on how well the person's speaking, the other environmental factors. But when you get into a moderate to severe loss, there are more of those puzzle pieces missing, and it's harder for the brain to figure it out. And so that leads me to my next slide. I might have a couple of these out of order. We'll have to see. Okay, so I'm just going to let people read this, and I imagine people online can see this as well. I'm just going to let you read through that. This is one of my favorite things to have people think about. This is funny. This is a joke, but it's really not. Like for people that deal with this every day, and I would just ask anybody here, has this ever happened to you? It's happened to me. When you're in a loud restaurant or you're with a large group of people that it's noisy and you're trying to fill in those gaps, right? Those puzzle pieces. And you think you know what you were asked, and you respond, and people look at you like you are crazy. Like, what did you hear? And this is amusing, right? How cute is that? But mishearing doesn't usually happen that way. And so what can we do to try to improve things, right? And so that's where we're going to get into. And you know what? I have to apologize. Well, anyway, there's one slide I wanted to show you, but we'll get back to it. So I'm going to move into another piece of the presentation, really talking about how can we improve communication with people. Okay, so someone has a hearing loss, and let's just assume they have decided not to go try hearing aids, or they've tried them and for whatever reason they didn't work, or people that have severe to profound hearing losses that wear hearing aids get some benefit, but they're never going to hear as well in noisy environments, right? Hearing aids do not make hearing perfect. One of the hardest parts of my job is to be realistic with people and to say, the hearing aids will help you. They will improve your hearing, but you're not going to hear like you were when you were 20. There's a nerve in the ear that doesn't work the way it used to. And so we're trying to give it extra information that it can pass to the brain, but it will never be able to manage all of that information and get it all up to the brain. So if you think you're going to hear like you were 20, and the other thing, what I've realized is in my 30 years, is people didn't even hear the way they thought they did in their 20s, right? We never hear everything. So sometimes people wear hearing aids, I didn't hear that. Well, you're not going to hear everything, but you should be hearing better. So let's put the hearing aids aside. Someone's deciding not to do that. What else can we do to help them? So I put together this little presentation a while ago, and I used kind of a cartoony message because hearing and ears are not sexy, they're not fun. It's not usually something that people find exciting, but I try to make it a little bit interesting if I can. So I'm just going to give you a few ideas on how you can make conversations better for everybody involved. And whether you're hearing well or you're not, you can use these in your everyday communications. So the first one I call lights, camera, distraction. And there are a number of environmental factors that we don't always think about that can help communication, including lighting. Now, a lot of times in presentations, we might dim the lights, right? Because that way you can focus on the board. And if we turn down the lights, I'm pretty sure you would see the board better. But if you're someone who reads lips and you're looking at facial expression, you're going to miss that, right? So in any environment, whether it's a home environment or a business setting, think about the lighting. You want light on someone's face so that people can read their lips and they can see their facial expressions. Sometimes you might want to rearrange seating so that you can avoid glare and shadows and make it easier for people to see faces. If you look in this room, we have the shades down. probably because it'd be a little too bright because the sun's coming in. So you want kind of a mixture of a decent amount of light, but not so much glare that it makes it difficult. And when it comes to windows, think about opening or closing the windows based on what noise is going on around you. You might want a little bit of a breeze, but if somebody is mowing the lawn outside, that's going to be a distraction, right? Noise is a distraction. Opening and closing curtains. So I will go into people's rooms and just kind of do a quick assessment. What's going on here? What does it sound like? Light environment. Some people will say, I sometimes will go in the middle of the morning and someone's still sleeping, and waking them up isn't always fun, but I've got an appointment. So how do I maximize that? And if I know they're not hearing well, I want to get the lights on without annoying them, right? So you have to kind of work into that person's personality as well, because you don't want an annoyed person when you're trying, right? We're always also trying to keep people happy and healthy. So, and it all gets back to thinking of lip reading and facial expressions, body language. Is someone happy? Is someone angry? And you get that from their face. And so you might say, well, that's not related to hearing. I would possibly argue with you. It's certainly related to communication, right? You're hearing, but you're also getting these other clues. So things to think about. In general, you're reducing distractions, right? You're trying to improve the environment where you can to make it a benefit. You're trying to reduce things like TV, radio, stereo, those background noises and visual distractions. For a while, I wouldn't, how many people have the TV on 24 hours a day in their homes or in their apartments? And it was enough for me to get them to mute the sound. And then I realized I don't even want the TV on because there's a distraction there, right? If they're not hearing well, we want everything focused on paying attention to the conversation. So again, working with them, getting people to agree that that's going to be a good thing. I don't know, for caregivers and family members that are part of this conversation, I will sometimes get calls from clients or make a call to them and their TV's on in the background and blaring. I mean, I work with people that have severe hearing losses in a lot of cases. TV is loud, and why people don't think that it would be a good idea to mute the TV before they make a phone call. And then when they can't hear me on the phone and I'm saying, mute the TV, what? It just doesn't occur to us. So it's being a little bit more aware and just working some of those things into your routine. So anyway, and we can really then concentrate on the conversation. And I always assume that when someone has something to say, it's worth listening to. So that's really trying to maximize that. Simple other things like chewing gum, eating. A lot of people will talk with their hands near their mouth. Not going to help when it comes to lip reading. In the environments I work in, because I'm primarily in assisted living communities, one of the areas that people socialize in the most is the dining room. Breakfast, lunch, dinner. They're spending a few hours a day having meals with people, and they're chewing food. You don't think about that. It's harder to hear when you're chewing and talking. And it's polite not to chew and talk at the same time, but the world is busy. And, how many of us have done that? So just things to think about. Leaving the face as open as possible. So creating that quiet environment is really key. All right, moving on to number 2. Attention, please. So 2 very different situations. We've got a full-blown conversation over to the right, and this guy's taking a little nap at his desk. So getting someone's attention, if I were to enter that conversation, they're engaged, their brains are active. This guy's sleeping. He's checked out for a little while for whatever reason. If you wanted to start having a conversation with him, you might want to have him wake up a little bit. Right? You don't want to get right into a serious conversation with someone when they're waking up or they've been resting. So how do you get that attention? Again, I'm coming from a world of assisted living with seniors that they might be sleeping on the couch when I get to a community room. Sorry, I think that's maybe not me. And so how do I get their attention? Because I may not have met them before. I'm trying to figure out, how well they're doing that day. So clearing your throat, getting close to them. I assume if someone can't hear, they're going to hear better if I'm closer to their ears, while also having them see my face. If you know them well, you can use physical touch as a way to get their attention. But if you don't know them well, maybe not so much. Some people don't want that initially. So getting the attention is important, and starting off with some easy conversation before you get into something important. I will oftentimes talk with family members and they'll say, oh, mom's losing it. She forgot about this, or she didn't remember, I told her about something and she didn't remember it. Okay, well, what was the environment like? And are you sure that she actually heard it, right? If she was a little sleepy, maybe not the best time to talk about finances or to talk about appointments that are coming up. So, and then again, just to face the person, because that facial information is so important. So moving on, a third suggestion, this is one of my favorites. And I think this, if you don't remember anything else about the presentation, and this is what is low and slow and loud and clear. So I'm going to talk a little bit more about this. And I think for caregivers in particular, many caregivers are female, and we have a higher frequency voice than most men, right? Men tend to have deeper, more bass voices. Women tend to have higher frequency, more treble voices. And the way hearing changes for most people, age-related losses, you don't hear the high frequencies as well as the low frequencies. And so the other thing that women do is when we get excited, and somebody will look, what are you talking about? Like, we're excited. We want to pass on some good information, but we move up into a range that's even harder for people that are hard of hearing to recognize. So that's the low tone. I think my voice was up here originally, and now 30 years later, I'm talking like this because I know that people hear the lower tones in my voice better. And so this to me is one of the most important things. Speaking as distinctly as possible. We're in a busy world. We want to get as much information in as quickly as we can. But the reality is, thinking about caregivers again, if you take time initially to be careful about the way you're speaking, you won't have to repeat it 1, 2, 3 times. You won't get frustrated. The person listening to you won't get frustrated. If you can just speak clearly and speak in that lower tone, and then also, just as importantly, speak at a good loud level. You do want to raise your volume if someone isn't hearing well, but you don't want to shout, right? When we raise our voices up beyond a certain level, and it's usually, where you're really trying to almost shout, your face gets tight, the muscles in your face get tight, and you look mad, right? So if you're already dealing with whatever the issues are that you're talking about, and you might be a little frustrated too, but if I told you, that doesn't set a good tone for the conversation, right? For someone listening to you. And honestly, it's not going to help when you're shouting. If you get closer to an ear and you talk reasonably loudly, most people can hear that, as long as you're able to work in that kind of an environment. So don't shout. It doesn't help anybody. And there are lots of things we get frustrated about. Let's try to pull that back a little bit. So again, the low and slow, speaking in a slower pace. I tell people, there's a difference between speaking like this and a difference in speaking like this, right? Crisp words with spaces in between. People can hear better. I was just reading something this morning, before I came that I wanted to pass on, because there are people here that are maybe, the ones that have the hearing loss and can be frustrated with people around them. Why can't they talk clearer? I hear that so much. The low talkers, why do people mumble around me? Well, they might not be mumbling, right? They might not be hearing well, or you might not be hearing them well. And so I oftentimes remind my clients, ask people to speak slower and see whether they will. Even with family members, they'll start, the first 5 minutes of a conversation will be slow, and then they just get right back into the same pace. So this article was mentioning that if you speak the way you want someone else to speak, they will oftentimes mirror what you're doing. I thought that was a really good idea. So that's something I'll build into this later. All right, so 4, clues are helpful. And what does this mean? Let's say husband and wife combination or good friends, somebody's in the conversation, somebody else joins them. And the person well, they're not hearing very well. Let them know what's going on. What are you talking about, right? If they look like they're confused and they're trying to figure out what the discussion is, are you talking about where you're going for lunch? Are you talking about the weather? Whatever it might be, the eclipse that just happened yesterday, maybe they're not catching the gist. And so just, give them a little bit of a hint, tell them what you're talking about, so the brain can start thinking about those words, what words are going to make sense that they might not be hearing, and they can start to fill in the blanks. And if there's a sudden shift in conversation or a different topic, let them know, oh, now we're talking about what we're doing tonight, what movie is playing. So that can be really helpful too, helping each other out. This is another one of the suggestions I think is really important for caregivers. The idea of not just repeating. How often will someone say, what'd you say? And you say the exact same thing again. There was something in that phrase that they didn't catch. Probably a consonant combination that just doesn't resonate in the brain. So how can you make it easier the second time around? Don't say the exact same thing. If you had a long sentence, try to shorten it. What are the pertinent facts? Give them those. Maybe appropriate gestures. If you're talking about the sky or you're talking about something in front of you, try to give them some other ideas of what's going on. And rephrasing, shorter, simpler, so that they can, again, get those details. And that can be really effective. Okay, little trivia question. Anybody know which president said trust with verification? I think he was referring to foreign policy. Oh well, sometimes people get it. I don't know if anybody in the on Zoom. Anyway, so Ronald Reagan, he said you always need to trust and verify. So basically, don't believe what you hear. And that's kind of my take on every moment. So when you're giving important information or instructions, how do you know that the person heard you? We oftentimes will accept a head nod. Yep. No. Right. I don't trust that. I didn't trust it with my kids. I'm not going to trust it with people that I'm around, because I know I'm in that world all the time where people don't know what you're saying, but we go along. We want to get along as humans. And so if I'm saying, okay, so great, I'll see you later today, right? And I'm nodding my head and somebody's going to nod their head. I show up later and they're not there because they didn't hear me. So you can repeat to them, make sure. And then the other thing is what I call beware the head nod. Don't use yes, no questions, because that's not the best way to know that what you heard was understood by them. So for example, instead of, did you understand where we'll be going? You might say, what's the address? Or where are we going later? Or what time am I picking you up? So they have to respond back with something that's important. And then the last thing is, for some people that really have a hard time hearing, regardless of their other circumstances, write it down. I sometimes will have family members, we can use calendars for people that may have some cognitive decline that may be a little tricky, but at least it's another way to make sure you get the information that may register with them. If they're used to using a calendar, maybe it'll continue to do that. So, and the last thing I would just mention is to be patient and supportive, of everybody around us. It is frustrating for people that take care of people that choose not to do anything about hearing aids. I get frustrated when I have those conversations and people say, yeah, not for me. Or maybe they tried them and they said, no, not now. And I know what that will do to their world. I know that will make their world smaller. It will shrink. They'll become maybe a little less social, but you can still be supportive in so many of these other ways. Anyway, I hope that helps. Any questions? I know this is a mixed group of people, so yes.
Yeah. If a person has cognitive problems and they don't recognize the filling on their ears with an hearing aid, and they will try to take it off because it's foreign to them. How do you deal with that?
That's tricky. I deal with that a lot.
Yeah.
Luckily, most people won't do that. Some will. I mean, I work in communities where there's a lot of cognitive decline. Yeah, absolutely. And so, I call that kind of like physical perseveration, where, they notice that there's something there. What is that? I want to get that off.
Right.
So working with people around them. I mean, I would think that if they're at that level of cognitive decline, they probably have people around them, I would guess. Caregivers, maybe staff in communities, family members, and just to divert their attention. This is not perfect, believe me. This takes a long time to get this to work. If they are really sensitive physically, and just to divert their attention, see whether there might be a way to make some kind of a connection that what is happening at their ear is helping them. May or may not happen. I feel like, you want to keep trying until you can't. You don't want to lose the hearing aids. And that's a big thing. Hearing aids are expensive. And so loss of hearing aids is never a good thing. There are ways to put little cords on hearing aids. I've been doing it for years. I started doing it in nursing homes, whether it's the kind that just fits in your ear or the kind that goes around behind your ear. There are ways to connect. It's called an oto clip or a retention cord. They're about 14 inches long. They have some kind of a connection to the hearing aid on one end, and they have a little alligator clip on the other. And so you attach the cord to the hearing aid. I always tell people to clip it at the very base of their neck, like where that level of clothing closest to their body. So if they're wearing a t-shirt or something under a jacket or a sweater, put it there. And if they do take it out, at least it's not going to fall. It's not going to go into the chair. It's not going to go on the floor. That can help. But you want to try to keep them in the ear.
Yeah, I heard that somebody put different colors on the different hearing aids, so the person would recognize if something came out or she pulled it out. That would go on the left, and then. But if a person has cognition problems, the person's gonna not understand or remember all the time what's red, what's green, whatever. So
red and blue,
there's gotta
right?
be
Yeah.
a way for you people, the companies that make hearing aids, to make something that is workable for people with these problems, because people with dementia or getting there are the ones that need it most.
Right. Yeah.
So it's up to the companies that manufacture the hearing aids to come up with a better solution.
Right. So many hearing aids. So hearing aids are color coded in almost all cases.
Yeah.
In a lot of cases, the ones that go behind the ear, this is the most popular style because it has a little wire and a little earbud and you can't see it. So people like that 80% of the time people are wearing these. oftentimes it's a tiny little red or a tiny little blue
Right.
dot. And I agree, it's not very big. Now, we want hearing aids to be small until we don't, because we want big things that we can recognize. And it's sort of this conflict of size. When I fit hearing aids, even if I fit this kind of a hearing aid, I fit it with a custom earpiece. So it's not that little generic, I call it a gumdrop, because those gumdrops don't come in colors. I think they should. It's a good idea. Maybe I'll mention that to a few of the manufacturers. But the earpiece that I fit, I either put a big R and a big L on the earpiece. If they look, I mean, we have to, how many clues can you give people? Most hearing aids are also now, they're rechargeable. So they come with a case. I think I left the case in the car. So on that case, along with the name, I put, there's a little well on the right and a little well on the left for each of the hearing aids. I put an R and I put an L, and now I actually put R red, L blue. R red, yeah, L blue. So that if they make those connections, right? And you have to decide what type of cognitive impairment, what level is that person capable of reading those things and processing. I mean, I really believe, if we can educate the population to get tested earlier, get a baseline as soon as you can. I mean, it doesn't matter if you're 40, 50, 60, whatever it might be, get a baseline so that you can keep track. And when you do get to a point where a professional tells you you could benefit from hearing aids, seriously consider it.
Yeah, because at the end of the line, as a person declines and the person is more used to.
Right,
Really
exactly. Right, and we know that what we're used to before the memory starts to change oftentimes stays in that routine.
Yeah.
So I have people that are, in moderate stages of dementia that will leave their hearing aids alone because they've worn them for 10 years or they've worn them for 15
But
years.
it's familiar.
Right, but how many people do I see coming into communities that they've had? So here's another interesting statistic. The average person waits 7 to 10 years before they get their hearing tested when they know that they have a loss. Either family is telling them, right? So they wait that 7 to 10 years. They go in for the hearing test. Someone tells them, you are a candidate for hearing aids. Your hearing has changed to the level where you would benefit from hearing aids. They wait another at least 5 to 7 years before they get fit. So most people that I'm seeing have had a hearing loss for at least 15 years, right? And so we're trying to make up lost time. You can't, re-innervate the nerve with what's been lost. And so, and I get it, but glasses became sexy somewhere along the way. Hearing aids never did. Hearing aids these days, in most cases, I mean, when I started in the industry in the mid-90s, I had worked in IT with human resources and, all the digital engineers and all this fancy stuff. So I moved into hearing aids and all of a sudden we had digital products in 1995, 96. It was so exciting. And I kind of knew, oh, okay, this is like a very cool technology. So we used to say that hearing aids were like computers. In the 90s, the early 2000s, there were parts of hearing aids that were really sophisticated. And then there was some older technology, some analog, some digital. This is like wonky stuff. Now I can tell people that the processing power in that hearing aid is more sophisticated than my laptop. Related to hearing aids, the hearing aid spends every second of every day trying to figure out how to increase the speech clarity. What words and sounds do you need to hear? And what sounds are not going to help you environmentally? And how can we're not going to turn them off, but we're going to suppress them. Hearing aids are very, very smart at doing that. But many of them have gyrometers on them now. So you can tell if someone falls. I have hearing aids I haven't had a chance to fit yet for me because I want to play with them. They will translate 77 different languages into your ear. You can stream your phone calls into your ear with an app. You can do all these fancy things. My clientele, I just want them to hear better. But we're building all these things. It's like a health device now. They can check blood pressure. I think they do temperature. I don't know if they can do, I think they do blood pressure. So there are a lot of these kind of healthable things built into them. but we still haven't made them sexy enough for people to want to wear them, right? When you pull a hearing aid off your ear, you go, oh, damn, that person's old. Pardon me, it's like a 4-letter word. But so we haven't quite changed it yet. But you had a question.
Yeah, I mean, I think just going back to your question of how to get somebody to keep them in, if they're already at a point of dementia where it's becoming a perseveration. I think from an occupational therapist standpoint, I would say it has to be part of a routine. So in facilities or in people's homes, it has to be part of like a grooming routine. So we do this, we brush our teeth, we do this. And then we put our hearing aids in, and it becomes second nature, it becomes something to accept. No, for sure. But I think if it becomes part of a routine and somebody's allowed to get used to the sensation over time, just like, we introduce walkers maybe a little bit before people need them, because we know that if they're further along in dementia, they're not going to know how to use them.
Right.
We try to get in that window of when somebody's just starting to show signs of maybe a little bit loss of balance, and start training them on it so that when they do have dementia progressing, it's second nature to use that. I think it's going to be the same thing with hearing aids, like she's saying.
You know what's gonna change? When Elon Musk gets involved and he does something that affects the brain and makes the brain brighter.
Yeah. Ronald Reagan wore hearing aids, and it was a big deal back in the day, but it still didn't break through, right? So yeah, we never know. I mean, I think we're getting closer, and people are much more interested, I think, in healthy aging in general. And so this is a piece of it. It's not one of the most exciting and the most, top of the list things, but I think it's important. So yeah, and it's it's not always a perfect situation.
It's a perception.
Yes.
It's people see hearing aid equals aging equals not doing too well, so people avoid it.
Right.
Well, more and more younger people are wearing earbuds.
Yes.
So
I was gonna mention that.
I'm sure that what's gonna happen is it'll start looking more like an earbud, and that's gonna be the ticket,
Right.
so that you can't tell who's wearing a hearing aid and who's wearing a music device, which is pretty up.
Exactly.
Yeah,
Yeah, like
yeah.
that. One of the
Yeah.
companies came out 5 or 6 years ago, what they call the healthable. The idea of it being healthy, and it was a big black thing. And I thought, oh my gosh, who's gonna? But it looks like an earbud. I wear that when I take phone conversations, in my office, right? So the Bluetooth. So yes, sir.
Yeah, I got my hearing aids 3-4 years ago. And my wife says it's time to go find another upgrade or whatever. And, have not been that happy with my original provider. So how do I find somebody? Do you do this work? Would you recommend somebody?
So my lane is mostly assisted living communities, and I'm busy. I'm working with about 24 of them. So I'm all over the county.
Oh.
So I mostly encourage people to find whoever the provider is. You want to be best friends with them. If you don't have a good vibe in an office, go somewhere else. There are a number of ENT practices, dispensing practices. We can talk later, depending on where you're living and what some of the options might be. I see some people in their private homes, but it's usually because of some connection to assisted living. I can't be everywhere all the time.
Yeah.
But I will tell you, the average hearing aids will last 5 to 7 years. That's the industry average. And so if the hearing aids are younger than that, the question is, has your hearing changed significantly where they can't provide the benefit that they used to? And that would be a question for your provider. Have they been tuned up recently? Have you had a hearing test? Hearing aids are programmable now. So a computer tells the hearing aids how to behave. So if you really should have a hearing test once a year, and finding that provider that you trust and work with, they will say, okay, your hearing has changed enough that we're going to reprogram your hearing aids. We're going to boost the volume so that baseline volume is increased to your current hearing needs. And then the other thing, which is really the biggest issue with hearing aids for anybody, not even in my communities that I work in, is just the regular maintenance. People think that they get hearing aids, they put them in their ears, they don't have to do anything else to them, right? You don't buy a car and drive it off the lot and, a month later say, why isn't my car working? You need to put gas in it, right? There's certain things that you need to do from a maintenance perspective. And with hearing aids, by far the biggest issue is wax. And, wax and hearing aids don't like each other, but they exist in the same environment. So that to me is the biggest issue. And
Well, I have these little,
little wax guards.
they're like, first of all, there's like a donut, a very tiny white donut in
Yeah.
the hearing aid itself.
Mm-hmm.
And then they give you these packages of 4 plastic little rods.
Like a little stick.
That
Mm-hmm.
little stick, and you stick it in there, and
Yes.
you gotta be careful, you can pull it right out.
Yep.
Flip it over and put the.
Beautiful. Yep. I like your style of hearing aid because it's visible. That little white piece, you
Yeah.
can call it a donut, you can call it somebody called it a mud guard, wax filter, whatever, that little tiny filter, that's 80% of the problems. And with the hearing aids that go behind the ears, I don't know if anybody here or on Zoom has them. Our industry's gotten a little bit lazy in the last 10 years. And you can take one of the behind the ear hearing aids, you can tune it up in the office after you test somebody's hearing, slap a little, I call it a gumdrop, a little generic earpiece, and send somebody out of the office. They don't have to come back. They can just walk out after they've been tested fit, boom, out that day. And sometimes they never come back in to find out, how do you maintain that hearing aid? You've got to peel that little goofy silicone dome off to get to that little white wax guard. And so this little gumdrop can get blocked up. You got to clean that, but the wax will also migrate into that little white filter. So a lot of times people say, well, I clean the dome all the time, when maybe they don't, but they don't take that off to change the wax filter. And so it's the little things that can derail having hearing aids work their best.
In mine, it looks like there's a little hole, depression, not excluding the place where you put the
Mhm.
white thing, which is filled up with some like brown gunk. And then I've got the 2 things that you can see.
Mhm. There are usually 2 little holes. One, the little
Yeah.
white piece goes in one, and then the other one is actually a vent that goes so that when you're wearing a hearing aid, there's a hole that runs from the
Yeah.
outside all the way through to the inside.
Yeah, I put a new white one in, and I take the old white one.
Mhm. Yep. Take the old one out, put the new one in, throw it away.
Yeah.
Exactly. Good for you. That's a beautiful situation. So you're doing a lot of things correctly. And then the other question is, do you have wax in your ears? Because if you have wax in your ears, some of the sound from your hearing aid is going to be absorbed by the wax, and it won't go all the way down to the eardrum.
Do you know, could you recommend a new hearing aid specialist? Because I wasn't that happy with the one I.
Yeah, okay. Well, we can talk offline afterwards. So I have about 10 more minutes, and then I've got to get out of here myself. But yes.
We have a couple of chat questions.
Okay, sure.
First was asking, who do you go to, what doctor do you go to get a recommendation for hearing aids?
Yep.
And then the second one was this person saw an ENT 2 years ago, and he said her hearing was okay, but now she knows she has hearing loss. So what are next steps?
Go back and get retested, either there or elsewhere, depending on their level of comfort. I mean, if you don't really like the person you're working with, it's a good excuse not to go back, right? And so it could be, I mean, it's always best initially to have an ENT visit. So the ear doctor is actually doing the full kind of ENT. Is there anything medically that could be corrected? Usually with, I mean, 85–90% of hearing loss is age related. The nerve just gets tired, right? But you want to eliminate any of the medical issues first. And there's certain things we look for in the profession, red flags, that we would then refer to a doctor. But if they've already been cleared, they go to an audiologist in the practice to get tested. And they're really the ones that will then say, yes, you can be fitted, or no, not. So she needs to be tested again, because sometimes the reason that the hearing changes, it could be wax accumulation. And if, some people go, it depends on your level of interest in your hearing. A lot of people will go to get tested. Someone like me will say, you do have a loss that is aidable, but what they hear is, I'm okay for now. Mm-hmm. So go with someone, take a loved one, because you don't always hear what they're saying, right? I heard something at a seminar years ago, which I think is it's humorous, but true, that when you go to a doctor's appointment, you hear, you remember about half of what they say. And about half of what you remember is wrong. So it may or may not be true, but I thought it was a good point that, take somebody with you. If you tend to get stressed out or you're just not going to remember everything, have somebody else that's there that's going to give you their opinion of what they heard. Yes, ma'am.
Are men more resistant to testing and hearing aids than women?
Well, I work mostly with women because there are more older women than there are men.
Okay.
I will tell you, I've seen what women will often do is when they get the hearing aids, the first thing they want to do is look at a mirror.
Mhm.
And because we have hair that, even my hair with just a
Right.
little bit of, you can't see those hearing aids that fit behind your ear. You just can't. With men, maybe not as much hair, but unless they're bald, it's not that noticeable. I mean, this is a broad generalization. So, this is not scientific study. Men will oftentimes say, well, most of what I hear, I don't care to hear anyway. Right. And so my response to that has been for a long time that I would rather hear something and choose to ignore it. We're really good at ignoring things, right? We do it all the time as humans. I want to know it and then just ignore it. But if you don't hear it, you've missed something. And it could be important.
Yep.
So, any other
You
questions?
talked a lot about earwax. Is there a way for people to proactively on their own do things to prevent the buildup, or is this something where they have to go in and have it cleaned out?
So you can't see your own ears,
Right.
right? That's a problem. They make devices that connect to cell phones with a little probe you can look in. I think it's best to have somebody else look. Primary care doctors should be looking in your ears, annual checkups. Some do, some don't, is what I'm hearing from people. So have somebody check. Don't use Q-tips. That's another presentation that I give on fun facts about ears. Do not use Q-tips. Just don't. Read the Q-tip package. Nowhere on that package does it say that you can use them for your ears.
Mhm.
They're not meant for that. So you get some wax out, you push some wax in.
Yep.
And you push the wax into a place where it's not going to migrate out on its own.
Right.
It's not coming out until somebody removes it. It's just not. So, I mean, I have a protocol with some of the primary care docs, some of the concierge docs that I follow around the county, where once we get the wax out and that person has a known history, I will write up an order for ongoing Debrox that the doctor approves. And we just do like 2 drops once a week before they go to bed. And that seems to, I don't know if it calms the wax gland, dissolves the wax. It's a combination, but it tends to delay wax production for people that overproduce. And the other reality is when you start wearing hearing aids, the ear's natural response is usually to produce more wax, right?
Makes sense, yeah.
And so it's just so counteractive, but we have to deal with it. Yeah. We get to end on my favorite subject. I love talking about wax.
Someone was asking, how do we get rid of the wax in our ear?
Yeah.
Yeah. Don't buy those little screwy things that go in your ear. It's just not a good idea. If you can't see it, you shouldn't be messing with it. That's my response.
Well, I have a very good factory of wax in my own ears,
Mhm.
and I have set appointments with my ear doctor.
Yes.
So I get cleaned regularly,
Yes.
otherwise I start feeling like there's something there.
Exactly. Yeah. And so, you can start with your primary care doc. For people that have a known history, work with your ENT, and it's going to be every 6 months, every 3 months. Yeah.
Whatever.
We had a guy, I worked part-time for audiological practice in Ansonia. At one point, as I was transitioning through, I started my mobile practice a few days a week and I worked with them. And we had a guy that went to the ENT every 5 weeks to get his ears cleaned out. And he came right over to us as soon as he was done because he wanted to look at we had a video otoscope, so we could put a camera in the ear and show him what his ear looked like. And like, you would think after every 5 weeks, do you really have to come and check it? He wanted to know that the doctor did a good job. But, you know, trust your medical professionals. They usually have your best interest at heart. So, and then I would just say, thank you for, you know, ears are not that exciting. And I appreciate you guys being interested enough to stay and listen to the end.
So much.
Great. And by the, I've got like 3 minutes for anybody that's here. Oh, and a few things. If you want a copy of the joke, I think it's kind of funny. I took the suggestions from the talk and I put them into a little flyer of, you know, suggestions for talking with hearing impaired. And then this is information about me and my practice. So you're welcome. And if anybody wants me to take a quick look in their ears, I did bring my otoscope. So, and it takes all of 30 seconds and then I just have to be out of here like no later than 5 after. So, okay.
Thank you so much, Leslie. We appreciate you coming. Oh, you want your.
Oh, okay. Yeah.
Did you